Hello, I'm John Hind, Director of Compass Resolution. Today, I have the pleasure and the privilege of talking to Tom Nash. Now, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, that Tom Nash, aka Mr. Divorce Coach, is the UK's premier male divorce coach. With a personal lived experience of divorce and co-parenting for over 35 years, as the child of divorced parents and later in life in his own divorce, Tom knows firsthand the roller coaster of emotions separating couples go through. Now, Tom works with men, women, and couples to process and transition through these emotions, forging improved communications between parents, improving their mindset and confidence, as well as helping with the practical resources to support co-parenting, step-parenting, blended families, and much more. A regular commentator in the mainstream media on all things divorce, separation, and parenting, with articles in The Times, the iNews, The Guardian, as well as guesting on ITV's This Morning, GB News, and the BBC. So Tom is definitely someone worth listening to on the subject I'll be talking to him today about. So welcome, Tom, and welcome to this Q&A.
Thank you very much for having me. Lovely introduction.
Oh, you're welcome, and well deserved. I know that, I'm sure. So I guess let's start. Let's open it up a little bit. Let's start with a bigger kind of question. As separating couples are preparing to come into mediation, which I guess is one theme we're kind of talking about today, which is this kind of theme of mediation, the couples working together in mediation, making decisions about very important aspects of their future lives and the lives of their children. Can we discuss some aspects you can help them with as a divorce coach? I mean, you've mentioned the emotional journey aspect, so perhaps just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, this is a hugely emotionally, psychologically impactful experience for anybody. Quite often we tend to forget that both parties, regardless of who, when, or how they decided to end the relationship, they're both going through their own emotional journeys, their own experiences of that lived event, just maybe differently, their own versions of their own truth and how it attains to them. And actually, it's about helping, whether I'm working with couples, preferably, or even within individuals, it's helping the parties to find the right mechanisms and support that helps them uniquely get through that emotional journey and to process that differently and better. For argument's sake, you might have, let's say, partner A, where maybe they have been the agreed party. So you've got shock, you've got hurt, you've got anger, resentments, upset, confusion, all of that emotional process, as well as, of course, those fears of the unknown. For partner B, who, let's say, maybe was the one that actually the one that called time on the relationship, so they've maybe been building up to it for a bit longer, they've maybe thought about it a lot deeper.
Yeah,
they're still going through their own emotional process and their own journey, and that might be, again, the same labeled emotions and feelings, but it might also be things more like guilt, shame, sadness at failure of the relationship, or again, indeed, fears, but just different ones. The vast majority of people that I work with, in fact, pretty much all of them, especially people who have called time in a relationship, very, very rarely do people enter into this with an outset and a want and a motivation to hurt someone. To the contrary, it's the polar opposite side of the spectrum. So actually, it's about helping clients to unpack all those thoughts, feelings, and emotions. There's a bit of an equation around how they all intertwine and connect, and help educate a client around what they are, how to differentiate, how we label them, how they attain to us. So it's also around kind of creating more understanding. And what I do is help provide those skills and those tools to better self-manage, thus be able to self-regulate. Fundamentally, kind of the piece of the puzzle to that is helping to learn to process and transition from those emotions differently and better, so that we can begin to engage in the formal processes that lie ahead, like mediation. How we're showing up at mediation. It's going to be difficult, it's going to be challenging, but how we can learn to understand those experiences for us uniquely, so that we can show up as a better version of ourselves.
And you mentioned that, there's often, or pretty much always, there is someone who has decided before the other person that the relation's come to an end. There's one catching up, and there's one who's spent longer processing. And you mentioned that person who has decided to call an end. They may well be going through a different, albeit emotional journey. And I often find that that relates to a sense of guilt, often, or responsibility for, because when they can see the hurt and the pain of the others and all children and so on, there's often that. So there is this and so do you find as a coach, in that process of helping them to raise their awareness and understanding of what may be going on for them, that empowers and enables them to self-manage better, to manage that? Is you talk about tools? Give us are you able to? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're able to kind of give us some sense of some of the strategies or tools or ways of, apart from just helping to educate them about what might be going on.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there's various tools and, actually, in all honesty, homework that I give clients, because it's not just in session, right? This experience isn't just the 1 hour that they see me a week. It's actually what happens in between those times as well. So it's a bit like give a person a fish and they can eat for a day, right? So we're helping to educate different skills and approaches. So I actually send my clients away with homework and tasks to develop these skills. So simple things, some simple ones are things like helping to educate people about things like the wheel of emotion, chunking down, getting down to the root causes of things, and actually understanding, whilst that emotion, which is the physical body reaction to feeling plus thought, that what actually comes out as anger, what sits underneath it? Is it betrayal? Is it humiliation? What's the feeling that sits underneath it? Keep chunking down. What sits underneath that? What is it about humiliation for us? Well, then we must start getting into things around being disrespected, a feeling of feeling judged, either internally or externally, by the world or by ourselves. And again, then we start to go back towards fears, and then we can start to help people step back from that emotive, reactional fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and get to some, what is it, how does it actually attain to me, so we can think about it differently. And if we can shift how we think about it, we can change the outcome of what the emotion is, right? So there's one. The other thing that comes up for a lot of people is internal conflict. So if we take the party, let's say, who has the guilt, the shame, the self-resentment, etc., where that's actually conflicting with their values hierarchy and their belief system, it's created an incongruency in their subconscious, because I would never be this person. All these things that I've experienced, done, thought, felt, acted, whatever, all go against the grain of who I thought I was. So actually, what we're also talking about is helping people to understand who they really are, and to acknowledge and accept and forgive themselves and love themselves again as well, and understand who they really are.
You often hear people say, and I know in your world of NLP and so on, you talk about parts and parts within and so on. There's two parts of me. One says this and one says that, and there's the altruistic and there's the more ego kind of attached to, and so on. And so what you're doing, I think I'm hearing, understanding, is you're helping them to understand how what's actually happening, the why, deconstructing, going down with them to sort of chunking down to maybe some core values that aren't being met, like respect, appreciation, need to feel heard, understood, seen, and so on, and then working back up. So how to meet those needs for oneself and how to work together for those needs or values to be met. That kind of work.
Yeah, well, that's where coaching is quite different to, let's say, to traditional talk therapies and counselling. Fantastic vocation and resource. I had a counsellor when I went through my divorce, and it really helped with a lot of past trauma, childhood stuff, things like that, right? The bit where I felt coaching for me was different, and where I know my clients find value in coaching, is, yes, we need to kind of go and disseminate some of that why, get the data, right? Understand how we've got to where we are. But then it's actually applying the, what do we do now? What are my choices and options? How can I go about this differently? What resources and support do I need? Who can help me? And then the accountability. When and where am I going to start doing this new approach? And like you just mentioned about parts integration, things like that, some of the other kind of tools, should we say, is bringing in things like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, cognitive behavior therapy. I practice also something called timeline therapy, as well as hypnotherapy. So there's various different approaches. And again, just like the uniqueness of the emotional journey, the mechanisms, tools, strategies, whatever you want to call them, however you want to title them, are uniquely tailored to the individuals, the experience themselves. No one thing is the silver bullet. It's about helping locate the ones that work uniquely for that person.
And that's so important, isn't it? And you mentioned that kind of integrated. You're coming from you're using a number of theoretical backgrounds, NLP, and I tend to use, although I'm a mediator, narrative mediation, motivational interviewing, so solution focused therapy, and all those kind of tools you use. You can then create that unique. You're tailoring your approach as a coach for each person, depending on their situation and their uniqueness, their unique experiences, and so on. Now, how does this translate into? So we talked about the emotional journey they're on. We started talking about that and how different the emotional experience the emotions they can be experiencing, both of them. How might that translate into communication? I know it's a massive subject, communication, in all its many forms. But
how long have you got, John?
Well, okay, let's narrow it down. Let's talk about a particular context. So I've got let's make it a bit contextual. I'm working with a couple, two individuals. I've seen them both separately for a pre-mediation meeting, and I'm assessing, priming, preparing, and supporting them for a specific purpose. The purpose of mediation, which is to make decisions together about their family and so on. Now, what sits beneath that, of course, is their ability to communicate well enough so they can make decisions
effectively, absolutely,
well enough, effectively, whatever that means for each of them and both of them and so on. That's where I would be working. Well, I'd be referring and ideally working with you to work as a integrated team to support this couple for that purpose. So let's talk about that kind of context. What would you be? I mean, it depends again on the individuals and their situation, but if we can generalize a little bit, what would you be helping them think about, and how? So
in terms of some strategies and approaches, cool. So there's a mixture of linking it back to kind of that conscious subconscious part, right? How they operate. Right? We're parking the emotions bit at the minute, but now we're looking at
meta programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I was just about to say it, and I was thinking, do I use that word because everyone else don't know what that means? But effectively, the software that we process in the background, right? How we operate. So we'd be looking at things like their conscious and subconscious communications, how they operate, things that attain to them. Again, we bring back things like values, hierarchy, and belief systems because that ties into our communication. We'd also then start looking at more practicalities of things. Okay, so again, we'd start looking at identifying and finding out what are those situations, lived experiences that I don't particularly like using the buzzwords, but that trigger a situation, that kick something off, that evoke something in one or both parties, right? I know, I just try not to use buzzwords. Is it situation based, circumstance? Is it consistently the same thing? Pick up and drop offs, for example, or handovers. I prefer transitions, right? Is it about words, phrases, other people being a big one, other people's names that have an impact to potentially where these people have found themselves? So starting to identify what is the thing that evokes challenging communications, right? So how can we better create a formula and a structure around that? It's then also starting to help clients look at alternative perspectives, what lessening their fears and anxieties, what lens are they looking at this through as well. So we might use, in terms of like strategies and tools, way to do that, things like analogies and metaphors, and also linking it back to future focus as well. Because we've got to try and help everybody that goes through this, that it's not the here and now experience of each little win or that battle mode. It's also about, especially if you have children, you are connected forever. How do you want this to look and feel and be in the future? So then we might start getting down to actually, let's say, some real live practicalities of centralizing and streamlining that communication. So we've identified maybe some of those triggers that evoke it. So then we start helping both of them to identify, okay, so where's the accountability piece? And we might go through a process of taking one of those examples. And so when this thing says, happens, spoken, whatever, it evokes this experience for you, what do they witness? And we're trying to identify the pattern. How does what do you then get back in a reactionary response from them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we create these chain of events. So then we start to look at, okay, so how could we self-regulate and the piece that we can control? Because we can't control what the other person thinks, feels, does, says, or indeed doesn't. So we can only look at self. So it's then saying, okay, so which parts of what you're currently doing are potentially instigating or not facilitating or whatever it might be. Where's the obstacle here that may potentially be coming from your side? And it's not about blame or accusation. It's just about, again, self-regulation, self-management. We then might start to look at more practicalities of, again, some of those identified triggers of centralizing it and streamlining it. I had a client once who had said their former spouse would call them at work, call them on their mobile, call them at home, text them, WhatsApp them, email their personal address, email their work address, like 7 or 8 different avenues. So again, it was about, okay, so we need to create a structure, a framework, boundaries around how do we centralize that? How do we mitigate the impact to you from an emotional perspective so you don't react, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, sympathetic nervous system? How do we create mechanisms that actually you learn to respond? Is the information or communication receiving, does it require an immediate response? If so, what's pertinent data that needs to go back? You hear I know that you know the acronym of BIF, brief, informative, friendly, and firm. I always like to give it a bit more kind of characterization, say, remember M from James Bond. What's on a need to know basis? Right? What's factual information they need and what's the stuff that they don't? Right? Mm-hmm. So we're just looking at all those different nuances, and then maybe skills like, as I said, I like to give kind of homework to clients. Rather than me sitting there teaching a client, I might say, when you leave today, go and have a look on YouTube and read up around active listening skills, paraphrasing, looking for confirmation and clarification. Also helping clients to look at those non-verbal communications, body language, tonality. It's not just what they say, how they say it. Right? Facial expressions, crossing the arms, right? Dictatorial approaches, accusatory language. So we're trying to help the clients understand all of this, and also at the same time do the self-work, but also help them to understand and be open to, not agree, but acknowledge where the other party might be in all this. How could they speak their language better, as opposed to just from our own? If we're trying to create engagement and contribution, we need to invite that. So we need to speak how they want to speak and communicate how they want to communicate to evoke it.
That's an interesting area, actually, that last one, you just picking up on that, Tom. A lot of my work, as you can imagine, because I'm always 2 or sometimes more, sometimes 7 or 8. I mean, one founding family, there are 8 people around the table, maybe using different colored pens and all sorts. But a lot of that is about, I'm talking to them about, when you say that, what impact does that have on you, and have that, and let's have that conversation. And I sometimes use the Marshall Rosenberg kind of model, the nonviolent communication model of feelings, unmet needs, and so on. Because that's actually quite a straightforward. It makes sense to people. So if you are impacted by when I kind of, you've lived with me for 30, 40 years, and it really irritates you when I raise my eyebrow because you're feeling judged or whatever it might be, and I'm starting to do that in mediation, and one of you's reacted. I might say, can we just pause there for a moment, because that's happened 3 or 4 times, and if that continues, I suspect you'll struggle to listen to each other and to begin to make make decisions together and so on. And so could you explain to the person what it was that they were doing, what need was not being met in the moment, if you like, what they were doing that was impacting on you, and let's just listen. And whilst Sue's doing that, Bill, can I just ask you to listen? I'll be listening, and we'll be watching very carefully. And afterwards, if you don't mind, Bill, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask as well, what it was that. And so we're doing that a lot of. Here's my question. So I'm not here to. Here's my question coming out of that. As I explain that, what would be really useful, and I'm sure you can help with this and do help with this, is working with couples, knowing that that's how I'm going, or the mediator is going to be working with them, with a very specific purpose of helping them make decisions. But you're helping them to communicate in that way, to be self-aware and aware of the other. Both.
Absolutely. And the purpose for that is, yes, it's for mediation, right? And to assist the mediator and that process so they can
Long-term.
achieve where they want to get to and get the value that mediation, I'm wholeheartedly behind mediation, what that can bring. But it's actually how will they continue to communicate after if there are children as co-parents and things. So, okay, so one of the things that I do when I'm talking with co-parents, and we'll probably talk about this in a minute, but just give you an idea, is that I will ask them things like, with their co-parenting framework or plan, whatever you want to call it, it's not schedules and what days where and 50-50 and things like that. What I'm asking them and what I'm working with them on is, how are you going to deal with potential conflict in the future? So it doesn't become conflict.
Yep.
How do you disseminate conflict to disagreements, right? How are you going to approach that situation differently? Again, needs that need to be met. How are we going to create understanding? Where is there a framework and a structure that allows for that, and for us to learn and go through the process, so that we actually create something sustainable?
Right.
And it doesn't, like I say, doesn't. I always say, co-parenting doesn't mean friends. It just means respect.
It means valuing each other as parents, respecting each other, and so on. I'm so pleased you say that, because, of course, we mediators, and there are hundreds or thousands out there, they're helping parents put together parenting plans. And I'm sure you're aware of the new CAFCAS, new online, and there is some important paragraphs and categories in that parenting plan about communication, just what you're talking about. But there isn't enough mediation. I might have 3 or 4 or 2 or 1 session with this couple, making decisions, putting together a plan. But there's all the stuff before, during, and after that you're talking about, where you as a coach doing exactly what you're talking about at the moment, working with them, helping them to create a more cohesive co-parenting alliance. I know co-parenting.
I actually call it a code of conduct. I actually get my clients to create it as a code of conduct, just like you do when you start work with a new employer.
Or charter,
the do's and don'ts, charter, whatever it might be. We can make it visual. It could be just notes. It could, whatever it is, for how they want to create it. But something, so we have something to refer back to. Right? We can always, as that evolves, move with it and adapt to it in the moment. But again, we're still having some basis to go back to that we are formally in agreement with as a foundational level.
And working that plan or with those tools, and will give them, I guess, the confidence and the added flexibility as time goes on, and hopefully the trust in themselves and each other, they can create something better as they're working.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tools. I'm okay. You mentioned co-parenting relationship. We may well talk. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that, about co-parenting. And because so much of our work as mediators, as you know, is working with parents. I mean, I do a lot of financial work as well, but let's put that aside for a moment. It's quite a bit dry. But co-parenting work, really important, really, really, really important, because of course the children at the centre of all this. To what extent do the children play a part in what you do as a coach? Depending on their age and so on. How do you fit into it?
Okay, so I don't work with children myself. I only work with the parents. Again, whether it's hopefully couples, if not at least one. That is where I would be coming back to you in terms of if the need is there and the necessity is there, and the parameters work for child inclusive mediation, of course, which I think is absolutely fantastic resource. How do the children play into it with myself? Well, this is around, again, that future focus, widening the peripheral view of a client. Right? What are they? Because we go into phobia, we lock down into those bite-sized immediate moments, those little wins and battles that we were talking about. So again, opening back up again. Again, I think you've probably heard me say this several times over the years. Very early on, again, whether it's individuals or couples, very early on, I will say to people, let's forget co-parenting for a minute. Forget who's doing the swim meet and who's doing this and blah, blah, blah. How do you want to co-grandparent? This is an intergenerational experience. Do you want it to become an intergenerational trauma? Ultimately, you as the parents get to decide. It's your actions and behaviors, not just your words. It's what you do, how you show up, where you're consistent, right? How you work through your stuff together, separately, etc. Right? And continue to as things evolve. Right? And actually, it's also helping things. I use I draw in quite a lot of lived experience to help people understand things as well. That actually, I have one example about, for example, my bonus daughter. Everyone else uses the term step, but my bonus daughter, when she was going through her GCSEs, she elected that she would prefer to be at mine and mum's house. It was close to school, like a PC was here or whatever. Her friends are this side of town. She actually worked part-time just around the corner. The majority of her life happened to be on our side of town, but it wasn't that she doesn't want to see dad, right? So it didn't become a mechanism to kind of lock that down and go, oh, well, we've got her all the time. Or for dad to feel like we're trying to be obstructive. Right? So you've also got to understand about how things evolve and what those realities will be, and how to consider what are the needs of the children, and actually whether you guys were still together or not. Part of being a parent is, as we all fumble through, adapting, evolving. Like, even if you were still happy and together and you'd never gone through separation, divorce, or mediation, or spoken to someone like me, right? At some point your child is still going to be learning from peers as opposed from their parents and evolving their life. Right? I like to sometimes say to people, it's a bit like empty nest syndrome, just fast tracked. Right? So where else do we develop the skills? So again, helping people to understand what those real life day-to-day experiences are like, and then how do they want to manage it, and then how they're going to
think of it in new ways. You just said that lovely new perspective, expanding people's perspectives by asking them to consider what it might, how they want to grandparent, that future reflective, or however whatever you want to call it, that new. And if you, I think, and that can feel quite challenging actually for parents, but actually I think it's where they need to go, so that they, and I think the point you're making is, so they help them to focus on how they're going to take care of and support their children's needs individually as parents and together as parents. Yeah. Resources. I'm always interested in resources. I mean, you know, I could talk to you for hours, Tom, and it'd be great. But we've got kind of 30 minutes. I don't know where we are actually with the time, but you know, I'm more.
I have no idea.
Nor do I, but I'm enjoying this. So let's move on to resources, and then we'll talk about how to instruct and how you might work with and so on. You know, that kind of more practical thing. But in terms of resources, I know you mentioned tools and things. Do you have any kind of apart from the divorce manual, of course? No, any resources you might use, or key resources you might be pointing clients to, or that you work with, you find really useful? You've mentioned already the emotional, the wheel, the wheel of emotion thing you called it, yeah.
Practical.
Yeah, practical. Yeah, absolutely.
Practical things. Okay, cool.
Practical, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, absolutely, of course, the Compass Resolution Divorce Manual, right? One of the other things that has become quite a common thing to share with clients, actually, especially for parents, is Resolutions Guide, Parenting Through Separation Guide.
Yeah.
Which can be very, very useful. I feel like I'm giving shout outs to people now. There is another very fantastic resource out there. I mean, there's a huge amount of noise in our industry, isn't there, at the moment, in the let's say in the family support industry, around court backlogs, the unpredictabilities, the cost, the impact, the emotional turmoil to get through it. There's a really fantastic book by Joe O'Sullivan called Almost Anything But Family Court. And again, the uniqueness of the individuals might pertain what other resources I might use. So again, there are some nice simple things that have broken down. If you were to go on to any Gov portal, and it doesn't look particularly great, it's usually quite clunky and confusing. So actually there's been some really good resources out there on things like advicenow.org, in terms of what to think about when organising your finances.
Absolutely.
What to think about when you're organising child arrangement orders.
Great site.
What do you need to consider when completing a Form E? And it's real nice basic terminology, factual. It can help you really do a bit of the work in the background, again, so you can come to coaching and come to mediation better equipped, working towards your goal, factual data, knowing where you are. So there is a wealth of resources out there. It's, again, that's a lot of what comes up in my role. Is I always say it's kind of like three main kind of core areas that kind of come up for me, which is, or dealing with clients, the emotional process and journey, and the communication falls into that, right? And then we've got things like the mindset, right? Improving and increasing mindset. And I'm talking about things like self-esteem and self-value, self-worth, not just confidence, but the foundation, the bedrock of which confidence is built upon. How they want to rebuild their life, what they want that to look like. Right? And then the practical things, whether that be other things that come up, careers, moving home, telling the kids, telling their parents, friends and family,
new partners,
dating again, blended families, new ground rules of how that operates, step parenting.
It's a minefield.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow, it's exciting actually. New challenges, new opportunities, new creations, new realities, structure. And as we're talking about resources, I guess in my mind, I tend to divide resources into experts, professionals, how you can and I can help in our particular roles and so on. The resources themselves, like books and things we've been talking about, Advice Now, Divorce Manual, Joe Sullivan's book, and so on. And then organizations they can go and look into, and programs, support programs, child support programs, and so on. I mean, and I'm not here to promote Divorce Manual at all, by the way.
You should be, because it's awesome.
Well, thank you. And you are, you will be an I contributor, and so on. So that's great. I'm going to be talking to you very in a great deal of detail about that in the next few months. Anyway, but before we do that, the divorce manual is what I'm trying to do with the divorce manual very well. And what we're talking about is giving couples, when they come into this process, most people haven't divorced before, haven't been on this journey before, and if they have, it's very different last time. A pathway, a structure, a guide. A framework, clarity, and so on. Most people say, I just want to get through with a minimum of fuss, the least stress, and least damage, least cost. They're very good at knowing what they don't want, generally. And give them a pathway to what they're, and some help to. And in the divorce manual, there's the resource section, and I give them Advice Now links, Kafka's links, links to great books, and so on. And so the aim is with that, and other great resources you talked about, is the linking. So people need to, if and also the key, I think, and I suspect you'll probably agree, is that it's important they both work from the same information. How often do I get two people who've been to different people, got different information, and are quoting that information to support their own positions and so on. So it's really important that kind of common source of information, I think.
Absolutely.
Which is why I'm talking about this resources. Finding as we bring this kind of this chat to an end, finding you, working with you. I'm working with a couple or one person actually. I may see one person. It's not suitable for mediation, but it's very suitable for a divorce coach, whether they're going through litigation, collaboration, whatever, other process. How do they find their way to, apart from you are on the Compass Resolution website, that's fine. But how do they find their way to you, and what will they do when they find you? What happens? They're knocking on your online door. Talk me through it. What happens?
Yeah, cool. So as you mentioned, first and foremost, you can find us within the Compass Resolution team. Alternatively, a lot of people tend to find me through Googling, simply Googling Mr. Divorce Coach, and you head over to mrdivorcecoach.co.uk. You can also find me anywhere on Instagram, LinkedIn, articles in the Times, YouTube's podcasts, etc. When a client comes to me, however they find me, if they're referred from Teams approach with the likes of you and I collaborating, or a family lawyer, or their best mate at the school gates, or online, all clients are offered a free 45-minute consultation with me, a chance for us to get the narrative out, understand where they're at, what those key high-ticket challenges are for them, those big-ticket items quite soon on, and a chance to effectively showcase and educate them around what coaching is, but also what it's not. The parts that we help with, the parts that we don't. Helping them to understand how they build their team. I always say there's really kind of 4 core areas that anybody needs going through this, which is legal support, financial support, emotional support, and practical support. Now, the 4th one actually gets fed by the other 3 anyway, because there's practical support from mediators, lawyers, IFAs, financial planners, divorce coaches, therapists, etc. So that fourth one gets fed by all of them, but it's ensuring that clients are utilizing the right person the right way. So when you come to me, you get a 45-minute consultation. In terms of how you book through that, there is an online calendar system. You can book directly into my diary. It sends you out the automated Zoom link, so you can do it straight from your phone. It's, again, when people are quite anxious reaching out to someone like myself for the first time, they maybe don't want to get on the phone straight away and things like that. Or even some people don't want to email straight away. So it's nice to have that disconnected, automated process. Right? From there, the onboarding process is quite straightforward, where we have mental health check to ensure that actually coaching is going to be right for them as well. And then we start ascertaining and sending out some homework before we actually start their first session. The goals they want to achieve, again, just digging a bit deeper into all of those challenges for them, so we can start to pull some resources, look at practicalities, look at the emotion, look at the communication, and then we'll set a set structure. I have all my clients book in blocks of 5 sessions at a time. They're working with me one-to-one. If it's a couple, again, we can tailor that because I work with each of them separately but simultaneously. I might see, let's say, mum at midday and dad at 3 o'clock. They would each have their own coaching confidentiality agreements until such time that we bring them together. So it might be 3 or 4 private one-to-ones with each of them, and then we bring them into a joint setting where we'd start to practice and put into place these communication strategies, the framework, the discussions that would need to be had, all of the real life stuff outside of the legal formalities and mediation process, for example.
That's really useful, and I can understand that. And by the way, your online system of onboarding is fantastic. I've seen it work, and all you guys out there, if you think about using Tom, have confidence. It's a lovely, smooth process. My question to you, Tom, as we're kind of drawing this to an end, is just thinking about mediation from a selfish point of view, and you. So we're both your coach, I'm mediator, working and we're working alongside. Would it be useful? Well, my question: what would it be useful for you to know or have as the mediation process is going, as the couple you're working with and I'm working with in our different roles? What would be useful for you to have or know from me and all the clients about the mediation? Would it be useful, for example, to have the outcome summaries to know what they're working on? Would it be useful to have some kind of indicators of where I think where the challenges are that they've come up with in mediation for you to indicate or give clues about what you're working on? How
in theory, potentially yes, there would be. However, what I would say is I want to get the direct feeling and lived experience from the individuals of one thing that's been a challenge for one, typically, as you know, isn't the challenge for the other. In some cases, one person's already got that locked down, but it's actually challenging for the other.
Yeah.
So it's, in theory, yes. You've then got things like confidentialities and conflicts that we need to think about as well. But that's also for me where I like to ensure that there is no crossover from that, because I don't want to encroach on mediation world. That's not my lane, and vice versa. So I don't want to encroach in the area that you're helping them work towards. That said, however, if the clients are coming to me saying that we were prepared for this other thing came up, that's what created some disentanglement from our progress, and now we're 1 step forward, 5 steps back. Right? Okay, so again, chunking down me, I can start working back with, okay, so what was happening just before, and then how did it attain to you? And I can get back into it, essentially maybe kind of recompress and re-engineer that emotional process that we're going through again. So at least then they can come back to you again.
Yeah, sure. And those boundaries, parameters you mentioned about confidentiality are really important. Obviously, as a former lawyer and mediator, I'm very those in mind. And I'm working on. I have a whole clutch of different agreements or engagement agreements that integrate coaching and mediation and lawyers and financial financial neutrals and so on, where the roles are very specified, the boundaries are very clear cut. So I think it's really important. I think you made a really good point that you guys out there, the clients, separating clients, know that what you'll be working with Tom will be very different to what you'll be working with me, but there is a possible supporting role that we can, the integration or a joined up kind of process that might.
And I think the other way to actually obviously approach that as well is actually so that it's not too disconnected, is actually not necessarily per se having the coach there in the room, but available as a breakout space.
Yeah.
So actually,
like lawyers, like solicitors, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that bit of a breakout space. I've done that in barristers' chambers through lockdown when it was all online. That I'm not in the digital courtroom, but I'm in another room that when they're getting a break, we're having a bit of an adjournment. I can reconnect with the client, rebuild them back up, help them process it in a quick bite-sized moment, get them ready. A bit like, probably not a great analogy here, but a bit like in the middle of the boxing match, right?
Sure. No.
Send them back to their corner, send them out to me for their breakout room,
Sure.
so we can kind of like pat them down, build them back up, get them back in and ready and prepared. But yes, I think it's the whole basis of why I love what you're doing is about that integrative team approach. It takes the right support network and right support team around you, and each person having the knowledge, the skills, and the experience in the unique parts that they play to support the clients.
What a lovely way to end, Tom. No, that is that's a great way to end. I would like to thank you for your time, because I know it's very precious, and
Always a pleasure.
It's our most precious resource for all of us at the time, and it's been lovely talking to you. Very interesting as always.
And we had the same dress code.
And we both, by the way, everyone looking out there, we did not coordinate our dress. We're just both light pink, as it happens. And I know it suits us both. No. That's for you. That's for you viewers to decide. But look, Tom, thank you very much again, and I look forward to speaking to you and seeing you again. I'll be in touch soon.
Take care, Robert.
Bye for now. Bye for now. Bye. Cheers.